Another afternoon blighted by mistakes, really, Alfie. Once again, we're talking about Saints being architects of their own downfall. What did you make of it all yesterday?
I think it's a tough one to sort of assess because I went into it and Tom was there as well. So Tom and I had a chat before the game and sort of about our expectations and what we thought was going to happen. And I think pretty much everybody you spoke to would be, at least sort of 2-0 Liverpool, 3-0 Liverpool. Just given their run of form, how good they've been. And you probably knew that on the day it would require Liverpool to be off it and for Southampton to put in a really good performance. And, let's not forget they had no Aaron Ramsdale, which we unfortunately sort of realised quite quickly. And then they had no Jan Bednarek either. So Russell Martin made an interesting couple of changes to his team, bringing Flynn Downs into centre-back and Ryan Fraser playing at wing-back with 3 full-backs on the bench, somebody who I guess he knows and trusts. And, for the large part, they did really well, Southampton. But like you said, they've been undone. They've done everything but win points yet again. So when the full-time whistle went and it was 3-2 Liverpool and they could have had a chance to win it, they could have had a chance to go 3-1 up. They should have had a penalty, I think, in my opinion, to make it 3-1. I was a bit, I was gutted. I was gutted because even though everybody in my Twitter replies sort of said, the dressing room's not going to be surprised by that. They probably expect that to happen. They've been here before. It just felt a little bit different, bringing the league leaders here, playing really well for the large part, and like I say, having a really good chance to win. But ultimately, they've made 3 really bad mistakes, and they've given the game away. It's a catalogue of errors for the first goal. Russell Martin said to me after the game that he takes responsibility for it because yesterday he just wanted them to play the ball up quickly. And if you look at the stats, Southampton had about 38% of the ball. They did play forward quickly. They didn't do the whole sideways thing they're accused of. But unfortunately, they paid the price because Alex McCarthy's rolled one out for no reason. And then the Flynn Downs clearance is poor. The second goal, I've got no idea where McCarthy's going. I know it was a windy day and you could probably put it down to that. The fact that maybe the flight of the ball, he went away from where he judged it. It didn't go that way. And to be fair to Alex McCarthy, with Aaron Ramsdale out, I know that you may have noticed he had a lot of strapping on his knee and he had to take injections sort of, I think before, maybe even during the game. They're precautionary, but ultimately to be able to play the game pain-free. So he did try and step up. He did try and, be the difference. He made a couple of good saves, but it wasn't enough. And then the handball, Yuki Sugawara, it's just it's unfortunate, but it's a clear handball. It's a mistake, and they've got nothing out of it. So here we are, they're bottom of the table with 4 points from 12 games. No team has ever lost 10 in the first 12 and survived. So if they want to beat the drop, they're going to have to break some more records.
I think, as I said to you yesterday, I'm confident they will break a record. I just don't think it's that one that everyone's been talking about. Steve, let's just kind of like work through it all in order, I guess. And Flynn Downs won't want to see that first goal again, will he? He had a bit of a mare there. But should he even have been playing in that position or taking that pass?
I mean, it's a bold selection, isn't it, to basically rip out the one guy who, before the start of the season, was kind of seen as the one single player whose position was absolutely 100% locked in and sort of designed, and moving him into a more defensive role where, I mean, Russell Martin said afterwards, didn't he, that he played there a few times for Swansea, but it was a very different proposition. Actually, in actual fairness, I actually thought he played quite well, other than the one very obvious glaring mistake, where he's tried to swing through with his weaker foot. And I mean, I think everyone in that situation where keeper has obviously I think let's be honest, McCarthy probably shouldn't have rolled it out in that position, but Fernandez has moved towards the ball, demanding the ball to feet. Which we know that he's good in these tight areas, but I'm not sure 20 yards from goal in the middle of the pitch is quite the sort of tight area that we would like him to be operating in, quite frankly. So he's taken the ball, he's knocked it back to Downs. We still had just about had control of the ball at that point. And I think if it was either Bednarek or Harwood-Bellis in that position, or even Ramsdale, actually, I think he probably realizes he's got a little bit more time than he thinks, and he could have switched it back. He could have sort of turned back onto his right foot and got it clear with his stronger foot, where I think we'd have all been 99% confident that he'd be able to execute that. But where he's kind of a little bit flustered, a little bit panicked, he's kind of swung at it with his weaker foot, and it's not even cleared the edge of the area, is it? And it's a great finish from Szoboszlai, but I mean, you've basically given him a free shot unchallenged from 17, 18 yards, and against £70 million footballers, that ball's more than likely only going to end up in one place. So yeah, really disappointed to give that sort of goal away, given that we'd kind of frustrated them, really. I mean, Salah had a couple of shots sort of getting in behind Ryan Fraser, because shock horror, a man who's 5'6" can't deal with crosses over his head at the far post. But McCarthy was well positioned, and he blocked them. I mean, they looked like good saves, but they were as a result of good positioning, and they were hit more or less straight at him. So yeah, we've kind of rode the storm there, and we were looking then to kind of start getting ourselves going up the other way, because we realised that this actually looked like one of those Liverpool performances where they were dominating possession, but they were a little bit off it. They weren't quite pinging the passes as we've seen them over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, where they can tear even the best teams apart.
Can we take any credit from that? Was that more the way? Was that to do with how we were set up, or was that just perhaps Liverpool having a bit of an off afternoon?
I think it's partly us. I think we started the game well. We had a fairly clear game plan, and we weren't just going to give them the freedom of playing it around and in behind us. We actually sat quite deep, which we don't often do. But that then meant that McCarthy didn't have to do too much sweeping up. We didn't have the pacey runners going in behind. And I always think when Darwin Núñez is playing, I think you've always got, I think average Premier League centre forward should be able to deal with a player like him for the most part. He's capable of doing something out of the ordinary every so often, but I just don't think he's anywhere near the level that someone like Liverpool need. And
he was dreadful Sunday.
Really he was awful, wasn't he? But I mean, the thing is, he's got a reasonable record.
Yeah.
But I think when you play for a team like Liverpool, you create so many chances, just balance the probability you're going to score plenty of goals. But I think Luis Diaz and Diogo Jota are much better options for them in that position. But
producer Alex is currently licking his lips and clapping his hands because he knows he's got some fantastic engagement with Liverpool fans.
All the Liverpool content, hi lads.
The comments we had on our last preview was mental.
Yeah, but I do also think that the conditions played into it, because like any time either side tried to play any sort of direct pass, I don't think there was even a clear direction that the wind was blowing. I think it was literally just swirling around, and it became a complete lottery. There were a couple of balls where Liverpool tried to play over the top of Walker-Peters. One went sailing straight out for a goal kick, and the other one, I think, basically caught in the wind, and it stopped about 10 yards short of him. So it was difficult for anybody to kind of judge anything, which is why I kind of have a little bit of sympathy with McCarthy for that second goal, because when the ball left Gravenberch's foot, it didn't look like Salah had a prayer of getting anywhere near it. And then suddenly it's just held up and it's fallen exactly right onto his foot. I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it? I know sort of like when you're playing under nines football, you're always told play to the whistle. And I guess this is a kind of similar scenario. You basically play until you know that you can't reach the ball. When the wind is doing silly things like that, it would have been very easy for an attacker. There was one where I think Walker-Peters played one over the top for Ugachukwu fairly late on in the game, and he just gave it up because he didn't think he was going to get anywhere near it. Whereas Salah has got the belief that he's always going to get on the end of something. Yeah, and that was ultimately the key difference. And yeah, I mean, shock horror, a guy who's on 350 grand a week happens to be quite a good player. Newsflash, everybody. It's what can you do in that situation? I mean, McCarthy. For a ball that's sailing over the striker's head, he's in the perfect position. He's just going to stand there and take it. But then as soon as Salah's got a touch on it, he's done. In hindsight, he'd want it back. He'd want that moment back again, wouldn't he? And he would probably stay on his line. But I mean, would the end result have been any different?
Oh yeah,
Salah from an angle 1-on-1, you'd still expect him to score in that situation, wouldn't you? Quite tight for the offside, but I think Downs was a fraction,
half a yard
about half a yard behind everybody else, which is unfortunate. But I mean, I think for the most part we played pretty well. I mean, you obviously had Tall Paul showing his stuff. I mean, again, 30 yards from our goal as opposed to 30 yards from their goal, but that got everybody all excited for a couple of minutes. But I mean, you kind of go through the 11, and everybody's had a contribution to make, kind of in a positive way, and it's just these sort of little individual lapses that have cost us, unfortunately, and a little bit of the rub of the green again, as Alfie said. I mean, that penalty appeal in the second half looked plausible. I do wonder whether the ref might have already blown before, because there was some shirt pulling going on between Armstrong and Bradley, I think it was.
Yeah, it was.
And I assume he's basically only seen the shirt pulling one way, because I mean, he's a referee. Of course, he's only going to give it to the defensive team, as is usually the case. So we don't get that decision. I mean, no guarantee we score the penalty. Obviously, we've had 2 this season and missed them both. But having kind of had one bite of the cherry, you'd have probably fancied Armstrong's chances of doing a little bit better second time around. That's for sure.
Yeah, I wonder if he'd have gone the same way. Tom, scoring goals has obviously been the biggest problem this season, and yet we scored 2 at home to Liverpool. So there were some positives yesterday to get back into the game with the penalty. There was some great contribution from Tyler Dibbling again, and then a wonderful team goal. It must have been a joy to watch.
Yeah, it was at that time, and you're right. Liverpool don't concede many goals at all either, do they? I really agree with Alfie. I think it was such a difficult game to analyse, really, and the press conference even afterwards I thought was sort of quite contradictory in lots of ways, because there were a lot of positives, as you say, Martin, and that argument that a kind of pretty valiant defeat and good performance at home to Liverpool oughtn't to define our season, but in the context of where we are and how we've got on against teams that we'd expect more against, of course, we can't afford any lapse now, and that's the problem. And I mean, I think we can all be a bit revisionist about team news. And when I was in the press room, just sitting with Alfie and it came out, I kind of thought, Fraser against Salah is a bloodbath waiting to happen there. Archer out of the team seemed to me very harsh. Even Manning I thought had played well. Alfie sort of suggested, it might be Downs in there, and I couldn't sort of really believe that either. And then I thought, well, if Amo-Ameyaw's playing, which I was, perfectly happy with, then it must be that we're going to be trying to deliver some balls into him. And as well as he played, and I thought he was really impressive. I don't think we did put one cross into him, so we he was too far away from the goal much of the time, as you referenced, Steve, for that. But he showed how much he has to offer. His touch, holding the ball up, his awareness, passing it off was all really impressive. And that was one of the contradictory things I thought in the press conferences. You probably remember as well, Alfie. He kind of, he was very complimentary of Amo-Ameyaw, and then said, he probably deserves to have started earlier, really. And you kind of thought then, well, why hasn't he? Given where we are, given how ineffective we seem to have been going forward. And I suppose my thought of the game was we might play quite well, but we're so unthreatening that Liverpool could win 1-0 at a counter. So at a counter, I say that obviously just to show how kind of completely wrong I was in terms of how the game went. But it's really dispiriting. I mean, I thought there were a few things that were different about Martin from some of his press conferences as well. So he tends to not sort of pointing the finger at players too much when there's mistakes, and he didn't go that far, but he opened by saying kind of just the goals were so bad, he kind of head in his hands as if to sort of I can't kind of explain that clearance and everything else. And I don't know, I mean, I think maybe you're being quite generous to Alex McCarthy there, Steve. I mean, that's not his fault, he's not that sort of keeper, but I wonder if Ramsdale had been there. It's all hypothetical. I could have seen it playing out differently because, yeah, I mean, and I missed the point about Fernandes actually demanding the ball, Steve. That's a really fair point. But I thought at the time, why give him the ball there? And Russell Martin himself said we just had a sustained period of defending. That wasn't the time to do it. But it's my fault, of course, because that's how I tell them to play. And I think, well, a bit of awareness on McCarthy's part should mean that he just does take stock for a moment or two. But we don't do that, and I think a lot of people say Martin never changes, and I don't think that's true. I think that's unfair. I think he's shown plenty of times that he does, but he doesn't really change his style, of course, and that's all anybody is going to be talking about. Certainly, people who don't watch Saints every week and realise that there were loads of positives. Fernandes again outstanding. I thought Dibbling, of course, and I thought, like Steve, I thought Downs actually had a pretty good game apart from that sort of dreadful error. So that we know it's a bit more nuanced than just Saints shoot themselves in the foot again, but that's the headline, that's the kind of bigger narrative, and that's part of the reason we are where we are, I suppose.
I guess, Paul, he had the international break to think about it. We knew what the issues were, so we were expecting something different. I don't know if you saw Cameron Archer dropping out of the team and the 5-3-2. What did you make of it when you saw that lineup and how we started?
Well, to a certain extent, I think the other guys have already covered probably all the points I was almost going to sort of discuss with you. Obviously, same as what Tom said, I was dismayed completely when I saw Fraser just thought, how can Paul? Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm a great fan of Manning. Maybe it's because I've got his shirt on my wall, and maybe that's the reason why. But sorry, here now. But I just felt, what did he do wrong to not get in the team? I just felt that playing Fraser was just, I thought, where do we go from here? But as I say, the other guys have covered probably a lot of the things I wanted to say. But what I was kind of thinking was, I tried to look at it from a different perspective, given the fact we'd had the break. And then, so I watched the game back thinking, and I never normally do that. I normally don't want to watch Match of the Day or anything. So what I thought I'd do is look at it from a different perspective and think, yeah, you guys already covered the fact that, yeah, 3 ridiculous errors. And let's be honest, they were ridiculous errors. But what game this season have we not made these errors? We've made them in every single game. I think we're highest for number of silly mistakes that have given away goals. I might be wrong. Somebody can correct me. I read somewhere it was 7 at least so far.
7 or 8 now. It was 7. Now it's 8.
Yeah, but what I saw from what sort of watching it back was that I went to bed the previous night thinking, how is this going to play out? The usual kind of worry. I'd thought to myself, 0-4 was probably get away with 0-4 and almost weirdly be happy, but I think there was definitely something there that was different. And whether Martin chose or I do wonder. This is probably my only point of view, is if the players who do what they do and don't adhere to the RM style, does he not pick them? Does he therefore pick the players that will do what he asks? And so therefore, some of the players that were probably now left out, like Archer and maybe 1 or 2 others like Manning, are they just not towing the line? Because, as I think Steve said, why didn't we cross the ball for Amo-Ameyaw? It's kind of a bit of a no-brainer, that one, to a certain extent, and just sometimes just change it up a little bit. But I just felt that it was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. That's the first thing I would say. I'm still upset about it because I love the Saints more than anything, obviously. But I just felt that there was when you see that goal that we actually scored, that Fernandes, there was a lot there to think, maybe, yeah, without the stupid mistakes, if somehow we could just change that little bit of culture at the back and not do that as much and just go for it. There are definite signs, and maybe by the fact that he has picked these different players, maybe we have stumbled across something that would work. So having Amo-Ameyaw was the major difference. Obviously, I wouldn't have Fraser at left back. Nothing against him personally, but stick Manning in there, or Bree, or somebody else, and then try that same team again. You've got to have Dibbling in that team. You've got to have Fernandes in that team. You've got to have Amo-Ameyaw in that team. Bednarak, if he comes back, fine. Would replace Downs, fine, going forward. So I think from a perspective of what's different is in watching it back after I'd got upset at losing, I could watch it thinking, okay, let's look into this a bit more deeply and see what actually is going on. I did feel that there's something there. It's a very small.
Is it giving you a glimmer of hope, though?
Yeah, there was, but I wasn't like that on Sunday evening. I was really annoyed I was already annoyed at seeing Verstappen winning. I didn't want to see another, something else. The good news is the Australians lost at cricket. It's about the only good thing this weekend.
And the women's team won as well.
No, to be fair, they did. But what I did see was something a little different. And maybe it's a massive oil tanker that's maybe just starting to turn. I'm more positive about it than I thought I would be, especially after I'd heard we lost. And all the people that work with me, they're all bloody Liverpool fans. And that's like, I have to put up with that all the time. But I did see a sign that the tanker was beginning to turn. So I'm on the fence with Martin in, Martin out. I don't think there's any point getting rid of him now. I think we're stuck. If we get rid of him, who's going to come? And now Leicester have sacked their manager. They'll get the pick of who they want. And so therefore, maybe he might have just stumbled upon something. And if I don't know how bad Amo-Ameyaw's injury is. Does anybody know?
He should be okay. I think it was just a bit of muscle fatigue.
Good.
So he should be fine.
I think we got to stick with that 11 bar one. Take and put Manning in, and let's see if we can continue on that and somehow just try and cut those silliness out. Sometimes we have to hoof the ball up and it comes straight back fine, but better that than giving them goals. If we could stop giving goals away, I think we might just. But I'm wondering, it's too little, too late, sadly.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I will ask Steve and Tom the same question if they share your optimism in just a moment. Alfie, one of the other things, the talking points for me was Adam Lallana going. I mean, he should have had a red card for that tackle anyway. But I just can't help. I think to me, it's sad to see. But is this one season too much? Because we had that problem before the season, didn't we? When he got injured in the warm-up at Eastleigh, and then we didn't see him. Then he's been in, he's been out, and he clearly can't even play 60 minutes at the moment. And to see him in pain, I think he's going to be out for a while as well. It's not really worked out.
No, I don't think it is, because at the end of the day, he started this season knowing this was going to happen. It's one of the first things he said to me in Girona back in July. He said that I hope the Saints fans accept me for the player that I am now and not for what I was 10 years ago, and for the fact that I can't play every game. And all he does all week is just try and prepare to be ready for Saturday, ready for Sunday. So I think, it's a shame to watch him. It's sort of like an old horse, keep going down. But he offers so much to the dressing room, and like when he's on the pitch, I mean, even yesterday, I don't think he put a pass wrong, apart from maybe one. I think he undersold Jack Stevens once. Other than that, I think he was pretty sublime. So I think he knows that what the situation is, and therefore I don't think it's a season too much. It's just a case of managing him, and they're lucky they've got another midfielder in Joe Rebo, in that it's not the end of the world if he can't play. That's my take on that. But I did want to just sort of talk about Tyler Diblin and Matty Fernandez a little bit. We haven't really at the moment, and Paul's right to be optimistic. I think everyone here, Steve, Tom, they've shared some positives, but just how good those two players are, and particularly Tyler Diblin yesterday, it's an absolute joke. And what I liked about Tyler Diblin yesterday is I felt that he was taking up a lot more sort of central positions than he has done for Russell Martin previously. For people who haven't watched the academy or don't know much about Tyler, he's always been a central midfielder. He's a number 8, number 10. He's only been out on the right because it's the classic young player breaks into the first team, stick him out where the game's really vertical, and they've only got to worry about going back and forth rather than scanning constantly and understanding. But I think now what we're seeing with Russell Martin is he's beginning to grow that trust in Tyler. I know he's been out of the team for a couple of weeks, but he's sort of played in that, kind of like a midfield 3. It was a 5-3-2 or a 5-4-1. And he picked up those nice positions right from the off. But the quality he possesses, the drive to win the penalty is ridiculous. We've seen him do it twice this season. And then the ball, the stop, the turn, and the ball to Adam Armstrong. And Adam Armstrong got a goal and assist. I mean, he missed the first penalty and then he nearly mucked up the second goal, to be fair. He did recover well. It's actually a good slot across to Matty Fernandez. But the ball from Tyler Diblin is absolutely unbelievable. And Matty Fernandez, he's just involved constantly. He's always, he does the most duels, defensive duels and attacking duels. He's got the most passes into the final third. He's just the heart of everything. And Paul's absolutely right. With Tyler, with Matty, with Paul Amo-Ameyaw, with Adam Armstrong, if it is him, or with Cameron Archer, it's not going to be enough, because they're probably going to go down just based on history and based on records. But at least they've got something there that you've got 4 players that you can play together, and it looks like a dynamic attack. And we've said all season that they keep conceding stupid goals, but on the whole they actually defend fairly well. So you can almost imagine an 11 there, which is half decent, but I still just think it's not going to be enough. But we've got to enjoy these players while they're here, because they're either going to opt to stay and push us up in the Championship, or they're going to go for a lot of money and give Sport Republic the chance to actually rebuild the squad next summer. So either way, it's kind of a win-win.
Steve, did you see a little glimmer of hope yesterday? I kind of felt like it proved that we've maybe got the players to give it a go, which I know has been the criticism. I just wonder again about that style of football and the silly mistakes.
Well, yes and no in terms of seeing a glimmer of hope. I think what I see is a team that is capable of raising its game against the best. Because the teams that we're playing against at the top of the table are quite happy to allow us the space because they quite rightly believe that they'll just beat us on the basis of having much better players than us. So Liverpool give us plenty of space to operate in attacking areas, which obviously came to their cost with the second goal. I mean, that was a fantastic counter-attack. But it all came because somehow Adam Armstrong ends up 40 yards ahead of Conor Bradley and has just all that space to run into. And I mean, you kind of say, well, taking Trent Alexander-Arnold out of the team, and yet you've replaced him with a right back who's got exactly the same defensive traits. Just acres of space. And we exploited that really, really well, I thought. And there was a lot of space through the middle as well because Liverpool were desperate to obviously push onto us high. That's obviously the trade-off is that's why you play these little risky passes in and around your own penalty area, because one pass then suddenly gets the ball beyond six of them. And if you've got more players that side of it or are anticipating the ball going that side of it and can time the run well, then all of a sudden you've got a huge amount of space where you can take advantage. And we did that brilliantly with that second goal. It was just unfortunate that we didn't quite get enough opportunities to be able to sort of really give Liverpool something to worry about. I mean, obviously they would have been concerned at 2-1 down, but I think like a mate of mine stood next to me, looked at the betting odds as we went 2-1, and Liverpool was still only 2-1 to win the game. So that's kind of a reflection on how dominant they were expected to be, and in actual fact, I mean, other than the one that hit the post and Nunez's failed cutback, other than the goals, they didn't trouble us second half. Really, we were kind of well organised. We were set up nicely, and we kind of coped with most of what they had to throw at us. So those individual lapses that was what was so frustrating. But in terms of individuals, I mean, it was interesting with Dibbling. Alfie, as you rightly say, he was operating a lot more centrally, but basically the first 20 minutes he didn't touch the ball, wasn't involved, didn't put a tackle in, didn't get the ball to feet. It kind of felt like that Bournemouth game all over again. And then the Lallana injury happened. Everyone went over to the touchline and had a bit of a chat. All of a sudden, within the space of 3 minutes, Dibbling's made two massive runs through the middle. So he'd obviously been told something.
Or the other player's been told, just give him the ball because he's almost better than you.
Well, maybe. But the problem was he wasn't in before that. He wasn't in positions to receive it. So something changed from somewhere. But yeah, those two runs, all of a sudden it's like, right, we've got someone who can now drive through the middle. We know Fernandes is good at doing that as well. And that was basically where all our good play came. So actually, while we can obviously complain that we've not put enough crosses, or not put any crosses in for Amo-Ameyaw to get his head on, actually we never got the ball wide. Everything good that we did went right through the middle of them. The problem, I mean, it's fine in games against Liverpool and the top sides. Problem is, you try and do the same against Wolves, and there's just no room. And that was what we found 2 weeks ago, was that Wolves sat so deep. Cameron Archer's main attribute is his running off the shoulder of the last man, but you can't run off the shoulder when the last man's 25 yards from goal. There's just no room to. I mean, hardly. I mean, even Kevin De Bruyne would struggle to put a pass on a through ball at the right weight into his path in that situation. So it's one of those situations where I think Russell Martin needs to almost pick horses for courses in many ways. I mean, Onuachu yesterday would have been absolutely perfect if the weather conditions hadn't been as they were. Whereas because of the wind swirling around, it meant that playing more direct and playing up to him as a focal point was basically just lucky dip, because you didn't know whether the ball was going to go into his feet, whether it was going to go into his chest, whether it was going to go sailing over his head, or whether the wind would just hold it up 10 meters short. So yeah, it's frustrating, but I think, yeah, I mean, there's something there to work with, but I mean, we've been saying this since August. That Newcastle game, there was something to work with. We should have won that game. Yesterday, we could have won that game. I mean, Liverpool had the chances in the end. That, I mean, you look on the stats and it looks fairly comfortable. But I mean, at 2-1 down, they were not comfortable, and as we've already discussed, should have had a penalty to potentially make it 3-1, and then you're thinking, well, okay, there's actually something genuinely there to hold on to at that point. So yeah, I mean, we can kind of bang the drum of there's something there, but as I say, we've been saying this a lot already.
What's your take on it all at the moment, Tom? We've obviously, Alfie, Steve, myself, have been talking about this for the last few weeks now, about whether the manager will stay, whether he will go. We're obviously heading in one direction. It doesn't look like he's going to go. What are your thoughts on it all? What do you think needs to change?
Yeah, it's so difficult, isn't it? I mean, he did say one thing, Russell Martin, that, you know, I suppose it doesn't count for much, but I agreed with as a fan of the club, and that's that he said the players here this season, who were here the last time Southampton were in the Premier League, would tell you that there's a much better feel about the place and about what we're doing and everything. And I do feel that, you know, there are players I can really buy into in a way. You know, that terrible season where, you know, the team's changed so much. I mean, the bloody managers changed enough, didn't they, as well? And you know, Alfie and I again were talking on Saturday, was sort of endless kind of 1-0 defeats that when we didn't even really seem to attempt to kind of, you know, do anything. And I think, you know, I know there's a lot of people very much against Russell Martin, and I can understand that, but I think, you know, you shouldn't really underestimate how big a job that was, kind of changing the whole culture of the place when he came in. And I think that's probably largely why we were promoted. We weren't brilliant in the Championship by any means, you know, and it's not a huge surprise, is it, that the fourth best team in the Championship is struggling in the Premier League. I mean, to me, the bigger picture is recruitment. And again, that's nothing new to say, but, you know, I think I looked, we signed 14 players in the summer, not including those who, you know, we nominally signed, but of course it went straight to Giuseppe. I think only 5 of those started, which doesn't speak volumes for it. Okay, Aaron Ramsdale would have done as well. And 3 of them were here last season, Fraser, Harwood-Bellis and Downs. So I think, you know, the problems start there. And to me, there are 4 big positions that we didn't sort out. I mean, left back, I find so infuriating. You know, I mean, Alfie, you wrote the piece about kind of how they would cover Bednarak's absence, and, you know, thought of a lot more scenarios than I could have done. But I think every game I'm sort of thinking, well, I wonder what they'll do at left back, and it's just ridiculous to be thinking that, because, you know, was that Charlie Taylor? Well, he's not in the squad anymore. I don't know what's happened there. You know, Manning went out, as we say. I would probably argue that, you know, Manning is not the answer at Premier League level. Likewise, Fraser. You know, Walker-Peters is often out of position. It's so imbalanced. I think centre midfield is another position. And again, not to be revisionist, as I said earlier, I think we haven't clearly used the 2 Premier League loan signings well at all, particularly in the case of Cornet. But on paper, Ogachigua, I thought, looked like quite a good signing, someone who Chelsea paid, you know, 25 million odd quid for, and, you know, had no intention of selling permanently to us because he's, you know, such a talent. Supposedly hasn't really worked out there either. I mean, thought he did do better when he came on actually yesterday. I thought he looked okay, but, you know, so there's that. And then I think, you know, clearly the striker and sort of the left side. So I'd say, you know, that's 4 positions of the starting 11, which is a big chunk of your team that to me is evidently not a sort of answer at Premier League level. So I think you have to look at the recruitment, and you know, he did say as well, I think, that we're a young side, you know, we're learning. And then I sort of looked and I thought, well, we're not really, you know, there's quite a lot of older players in that team, actually. I guess we are a very inexperienced side at this level. But, you know, I am that camp, and I know it will anger a lot of people, that I just think the players aren't, the squad we have is not good enough to be one of the top 17 in the Premier League, unfortunately. And on balance, I'd probably rather, see us take the kind of approach we did on Sunday than maybe what we saw last time we were in the Premier League. But it is difficult to find any long-term hope. And I think, as you said, Alfie, just enjoy these players that we've got while they're here, because it's nice to be talking about those players again. As I said, wasn't really a player I identified with in that way, I would say, so much last time we were in the Premier League. So yeah, sorry, it's not really finding much positivity for you, Martin. But
no, and Paul, I think judging by your facial expressions, you'll agree about the recruitment. And I think we touched on this last week. By staying with the manager, are they essentially saying that we got the recruitment wrong? Because if they are saying if we had the right players, then they'd expect to get a better tune out of them, and they're not. So they're clearly shouldering some of that responsibility.
Yeah, no. Steve made a good point about the fact that we seem to play better against better teams, but you made a good point about the space, and our players aren't good enough to beat the other teams that are so-called around us. And if we can't beat them, then I don't want to be. Every time I come on here, I always think so. I don't want to be negative, but I feel negative because I just think, oh,
come on in.
I know. They just think myself, but we've oddly, our next run of games are against better teams, so maybe we might actually do better. And then I don't know. I probably have this recurring dream that I'm going to wake up and we've gone and beat Brighton 6-0 because we've played brilliantly. But I know it's not going to happen. But I think the point I made before was that we shopped in Poundland, sadly, at the beginning of the season when we should have been shopping in Fortnum and Masons, and we couldn't afford to do that. So we had to go. I mean, you talk about Charlie Taylor disappearing. Where's Brereton Diaz gone? I mean, what I genuinely was quite pleased when he turned up. I'd forgotten about
Cornet as well. When
no, that's not. Ice cream Cornet is more like as far as he's concerned. But that game against Stoke, Cornet just no. And other players have disappeared. As I say, Diaz. I don't. When he played for Sheffield United last season, I thought he's gonna score us a few goals. He looks like that kind of guy who's going to get stuck in. He
scored that goal against Lazio as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, I know. I was jumping up and down thinking, great.
Here we go.
Yeah. And then it's just all fallen apart. And it's okay, we do make the mistakes at the back, but I don't think the problem is at the back. I think the problem is at the front, because in football, unless I'm mistaken, the only way you're going to win a game is by scoring goals. And you talked about 2 years ago when we lost 1-0, 1-0, 1-0, 1-0 all the time. What's the common denominator? We never scored. So unless we're actually going to do something up front and actually go for it, I'd almost rather, as much as it pains me to say, I'd rather sort of say, okay, do what we did yesterday against Liverpool, go for it. If we get beat 4-3, well, at least we've tried. What is the point of going out to sort of lose 1-0 and hope that it doesn't get too bad? I just can't see the point of that. And I think in terms of going back to your original point, the recruitment, poor. But who's that really on? Do we? I don't know the answer to this. Who's that really on? Is that Sport Republic? Is that Russell Martin? Who actually made those decisions for those players? If we knew the answer to that question, that might give us some direction about whether RM's staying or going. And as I said earlier, if he did leave, who's going to want to be associated with us going down? Potter won't want to do that. I mean, all these names like Van Nistelrooy being bandied about. I mean, what experience has he got? I'd rather take someone like Mark Robbins, to be honest with you. At least I feel he might, somebody that might just sort of shake them up a little bit. I think we're too complacent. And I think that, sadly, it's too little too late again. Sorry to add on the same point as I made earlier, but I'm struggling to see, unless we actually change that boat even quicker, to turn it round to say, right, we've got to go for it. We can't just keep hoping we might just get an odd win here or there. I just can't see where that's going to come from. Yeah,
no, I agree. And I stick by what I said at the start. I think the only record we're going to break this season is derbies at the moment. So I just want to ask you about Player of the Week as well. Anything else on Liverpool before we do, though? Anything else that stood out? Anything else we've missed?
We haven't talked about the penalty. I've looked at that 3 or 4 times again, because I took the emotion out of it, watched it again, tried to think, right, okay, if that's not a penalty, because you look at those Liverpool players, they're not thinking, no. I'm sorry. If we'd have gone 3-1 up then, okay, who knows how it might have turned out. But that's a bit of a game-changing moment. And if the Wolves one went against us, well, that one's gone against us. I mean, how many more? I don't want to get into this big club debate about the big clubs get all the decisions. I don't believe that's really true. But we do seem to suffer That's
And
all I
Howard
would-
Webb got mentioned again afterwards.
Howard
Alfie.
Webb got mentioned again. Russell Mine, he reassured us he does like Howard Webb, but he does not see the point of talking to him again because nothing's going to change. And I totally
No.
agree.
No.
Okay. Let's do player of the week. It was Fernandez who won last week. That was his second of the season. I think he's in with a shout. I'm going to put him down
Make this
first.
Yeah,
We're going to make
three.
it 3 in a row. Paul, for you, Fernandez, yeah?
Well, only because when the new kit launch was done, I decided to go and get Fernandez on the back, and I'm sticking to it. So 3,
Okay.
yeah.
Steve?
Yeah, can't really argue with that. Dibbling was excellent for 70 minutes. Second sort of latter part of the game. So yeah, chuck him in as an option.
Tall Paul, Alfie, would he get a nod, do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Dibbling
I'm
and
not that
Fernandez
tall.
would be,
Not
Dibbling
a
and
tall
Fernandez would be
Thanks for
ahead
the
of
nod.
me, but for what Paul did in terms of just getting the crowd on side and getting everyone up off their feet, yeah, I would definitely go for Paul. I thought it was great value to watch. And why is he doing a no-look pass in midfield when we're playing? I don't know, but I like it.
Anyone else, Tom, to add to the list?
No, I don't think I can deviate away from Fernandez. I would say probably. I agree with Steve. Dibbling, understandably, with his age faded a little bit towards the end. I thought there were some other decent performances. I thought Kyle Walker-Peters for the most part was pretty good again. But yeah, my vote would go to Fernandez, I think.
Fair dues. We'll get that on social media.